All right, Kim, I think you can take us away.
All right. Awesome. Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday. I hope you guys have had a good week. Um, Thanks again for being so flexible and allowing the extra hour of time for today's meeting. I think we will find that we'll use it all up, and if we don't, then that will be a miracle. But lots to cover today, so we're going to just go ahead and dive in as we do. All right. Um, So I guess before we start, we have a new board member joining us today. And we're really, really excited to have her on board. And so Jess, I want to pass it over to you just to give a quick introduction of yourself. And then if you want to share the board seat that you are filling, that would be great.
Hi, good morning. Thanks, Kim. Um, Hello, everyone. My name is Jess Hoover. I work for the High Country Conservation Center, which is an environmental nonprofit in Summit County. So I am filling the environmental/sustainability organization role. I am actually currently in Portland, Oregon. So still waking up and drinking my morning coffee, but I'm really excited to jump in and work on this project with all of you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jess. We're really excited to have you. And thanks for jumping in midstream here. It's really great to be able to fill those board seats. All right, so we'll carry on with our meeting plan for the day. So our objectives for the day. We want to spend a little bit of time before we dive into our C406 discussion to share with the board now that the published IECC is out and we've been able to actually look at it in much cleaner terms. We wanted to share a little informational update about credit carryover allowances that I think will help steer and drive our discussion around C406 and the tables. And then for the first chunk of today's meeting, we'll be working through outstanding discussion items and proposals for C406. So we are looking for guidance from you all on the structure of the C406 tables. And then second sort of piece of that is the total points that we want to require through the C406 tables. And then for the second section of our agenda today, we'll be diving into C407 and the board proposals for changes in that section. So this is what it looks like on our agenda. We'll do a quick approval of meeting minutes, and then we'll do our C406 discussion wrap up. It'll be quite a long wrap up, but we want to make sure there's ample time for you guys to discuss and come to consensus on what we want to do within C406. At 10:45, I'm going to call a hard stop to the C406 discussion. So I just want to put that in everyone's brain. We're going to really, really try to dial in and keep everybody on task and on time today because we have to continue on to C407 discussions. So we'll give you guys a 10-minute break at 10:45, so a little bit less than 2 hours. So if you guys can all hold your sort of need to get up and move around till that break, we'll give you a solid 10 minutes to take a brain break. And then we'll move into our C407 discussion where we'll look through a couple of board proposals for changes to C407 and then discuss any outstanding needs that result from our C406 discussion and how that might impact C407. And then we'll try to wrap up at noon and get you guys off on to the rest of your days. So before we do the approval of meeting minutes, I just wanted to, and that this will become a more consistent part of our meetings, but I think we just wanted to really make sure and call attention for the board to the public comment forms that we have available for you, for the public to submit comments to the board on how they would like to see this code changed. So you all were emailed the public comment forms. They're also always available on CEO's website for you guys to check anytime. Just wanted to review a couple expectations on how we are hoping you all interact with these since we have such limited time in the meeting. We're really looking to you guys to kind of sort of lead your own investigation of these comments and see what you'd like to bring forward. So we ask that you guys are regularly checking those public comments. And again, we'll keep reminding you guys about this and we'll also keep sending those via email. And then if you see something in the public comment that you want to bring up as a proposed change or you want to discuss it, these are the ways we'd suggest that you do that. I realize at this point we are fairly through our commercial discussions, but there will be lots of time to iterate on the commercial code draft as we move forward. So if we send out any surveys or if we're doing board proposals on that topic, we encourage you guys to pull in any public comments that you agree with and would like to move forward. If the topic's on the agenda and you didn't get a chance to submit it in a survey because of the timing was misaligned, but if the topic's on an agenda for a future meeting, let Adam and I know if you want to add a proposal for the board to consider, and we can work that into our future agendas. If it's not a topic on a future agenda, please also just email us to let us know that you're thinking about it, so we can have a heads up in case it comes in as a board proposal later on when we're reviewing drafts. So we recognize we don't have as much time as we all would like to really sit with these public comments and spend time discussing them in great detail during each one of these meetings. So we ask that you guys just sort of follow this protocol and keep us posted as you're hearing public comments that you're interested in. Any quick questions on this before we move on? Okay, I'm not hearing any. Great. So we'll move on to the approval of the meeting minutes. Do we have any board members who would like to make a motion to approve meeting minutes from meeting 12?
I move to approve the meeting minutes from 12.
Second.
Thank you, Tim. All right, all in favor of approving meeting minutes for meeting 12, please say aye.
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 Thanks, everyone. And anyone opposed, please say nay. Okay, awesome. So meeting minutes from meeting 12 are approved unanimously, and we will get those up on the CEO website for the public to read. Okay, so we're just going to dive right in here today. So starting with our C406 discussion wrap up, we're going to start this session with a quick informational bit for you all, and then we're going to dive into three primary discussion topics for C406. So Adam, I'm going to pass it over to you for the next couple slides here.
Sure, thanks, Kim. So everybody, I think, there was a lot of questions around, or not necessarily questions, but discussion around the flexibility within C406 to essentially, choose to do like all efficiency work if a project decides to do that, or choose to do more renewable and load management, just having more flexibility across the tables. And that was largely one of the reasons, that flexibility was one of the reasons, and simplicity was one of the reasons why the board felt strongly about the opportunity potentially to combine the tables in C406. And so we just wanted to share, especially something that became a little clearer when the final code was published and we could look at a clean version of the code, was what the code currently allows in its published form for carryover of different credits between the two different categories, the additional efficiency credits and the renewable and load management credits. And so for additional efficiency credit carryover, they can be used to meet as many renewable and load management credits on a one-to-one basis as the developer or design professional wants to do. So if a project is not interested in using any renewable energy or any load management measures in order to meet the credit requirements under C406, the way the code is currently written is that you can do that. You can use only efficiency measures to meet those requirements without any limits. The reverse is also true, except that there are limits on how much you can use of renewable and load management. So renewable and load management credits, as we already were aware, can be used to meet additional efficiency credits on a one-to-one basis. But there are those limits that are set in that separate table that's in C406, C406.1.1, table number 2. So we just wanted to make sure that that was really clear for everybody. And then if we go to the next slide, we can just see what the code language is. It's highlighted here for C406.1.2, the highlighted language there at the bottom in yellow is the language that says that a building can achieve more energy efficiency credits than are required, and they can be used in lieu of the renewable and load management credits as on a one-to-one basis, and there is no limit set in that exception. And then if we scroll to the next slide, this is just the table that we've seen several times already, which is the limits on the reverse of that. So if you use more renewable and energy and load management credits than are required under the code, you can use extra credits that you achieved there to discount the number of energy efficiency credits you have to get with the limits set here in this table, depending on occupancy and on climate zone. So we just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware that the code language allows that, as we are discussing whether or not to keep the tables and the credit categories separated, or whether or not to combine them in the C406 going forward. So does anyone have any questions on that? Okay, hearing none. Kim, we'll turn it back to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam. Okay, so that was our quick informational bit for this session. And so now we'll move into our first discussion item for C406. And this is really wanted to tee this up by reminding folks of what we accomplished at the last meeting as far as the decisions we made for changes to C406. And we voted in a straw poll to add 4 new credit options to C406. 2 of those are related to refrigerant usage. One was a credit for all electric buildings using minimum efficiency heat pumps, and 1 credit was for evaporative cooling. Now, because Adam missed our last meeting and spent a week at the ACEEE summer study, I think he came back from that with an idea to just slightly alter this middle option that we had voted in last time to allow credit for all electric buildings that use above minimum efficiency heat pumps. And so we're going to do a quick board proposal review, and we're going to keep it in the same format that we have for future or in past meetings, where we'll turn it over to Adam to give him 1 quick minute to share the rationale and what he would like to change. We'll allow for around 5 minutes of Q&A and comments from the board, and then we'll do a quick straw poll to see if folks agree with the change that Adam is proposing. So Adam, I will pass it back to you, and I'll give you 1 minute on the clock.
Sure, thanks, Kim. So everybody, I think, we had CEO had proposed the new credit that would provide additional credit for buildings that would use high efficiency heat pumps as their minimum equipment selection under C403. And in some of those discussions that I had with some folks and shopping this idea around a little bit, there was raised the question of whether or not it would be valuable to just have a credit that essentially creates or provides credit based on the overall efficiency, weighted efficiency. So if you're only using certain high efficiency equipment for only part of a building heating load or part of a building water heating load, that there would be like a weighted efficiency metric for the credit option. But whether or not to allow mixed fuel, higher efficiency mixed fuel equipment to be able to achieve this credit, and essentially then just replace the current credit that's in the code right now, which is H02. For those of you who have read the code really closely, for those of you who have not, that is the credit that allows or provides credit for efficiency gains above the minimum efficiency requirements for space heating equipment generally. And so that's generally the proposal, is whether or not to only limit that additional credit to buildings that get those heat pumps, or whether or not to provide credit to those who still choose higher efficiency non-electric equipment than they are required to choose.
Awesome. Thank you, Adam. Okay, so we'll now move into sort of a Q&A comment session. And so if any folks on the board have questions for Adam and what the sort of intent here is, raise your hand, or if you have general comments, also raise your hand and we'll just go through in order. So Rob, I'll pass it over to you.
So I'm still not exactly clear on what the proposal is. The apply to all buildings, that means even buildings that choose to not employ heat pumps at all, provided that heating system is greater than federal minimums, they're going to get similar credits.
They would get some level of credit, and the credit would be an increasing credit based on the efficiency of that system. So like you would set at basically the minimum requirement, Rob, would be like 80% is the minimum efficiency furnace, let's just say. That equipment gets 0 credit. Like it would get no credit under this anything
Understood.
that like it would be a sliding scale of increasing amount of credit based on the efficiency of the equipment you use. We had originally only proposed the credit where it's like basically you would get 0 credit if you choose the baseline electric equipment and anything above that. But I think that this proposal is trying to expand it to basically any higher efficiency equipment than what is mandatorily or the minimum mandatory requirement under the code.
So is the idea to create, so you said replace the heating, this would replace the HO2 line within the table. Is the, don't click around, you're confusing me.
Don't mean to throw you off, Rob. I'll go back.
No, is the idea to create two line items, one for all electric with minimum efficiency heat pumps, and another one for mixed fuel buildings with fossil heating systems that exceed code minimums?
The idea is to try to create a singular credit that would create a weighted like efficiency metric
Okay.
of the equipment in the building, regardless of the equipment type that you're using. That may have to be broken up into 2 different categories depending on whether it's electric or non-electric equipment, but it would the idea is that it would be like a weighted credit based on that efficiency metric that comes out of that.
I don't want to take too much more time because I know we're on a finite. I don't want to take up too much time, but my understanding of the prior proposal on this is that for all electric buildings, there's basically a credit for heat pumps.
Right.
And in this one, there's basically only a heat pump credit if the heat pump is greater than code minimum.
No. So it would be if the heat pump is greater efficiency than the minimum heating you would have. So there is going to be, would be some effort to try to essentially create some equivalent across the board where you would essentially get credit for recognizing that minimum heat pump is more efficient than the minimum gas furnace, but that a high efficiency gas furnace is also more efficient than a minimum gas furnace.
All right.
And try to create like a sliding scale that would weight it based on how much more efficient it is than that minimum.
I could keep going, but I'll yield my time.
Thanks. Elizabeth?
Yeah, Adam, sorry, could you explain how that's different than the current HO2?
Well, because the current HO2 is all my understanding is that it's all based on the relative efficiency to the minimum equipment that you choose under C403. So like if you're choosing if your building uses heat pump systems, then you would have to get a 5% minimum of 5% efficiency improvement above the heat pump system that you choose in order to get credit under H02. Whereas what we're saying is you would get additional credit recognizing how much more efficient that heat pump is than the minimum efficiency equipment that you could have chosen, the very bare minimum.
So then are you like normalizing these by a metric?
That would be the goal, is to normalize them across a metric. Yes.
And can you expand on that?
Yeah, I don't know that we know exactly what exactly what that metric or normalization would look like. I think we'd have to do some back end work to figure out exactly how to normalize that. But that was the idea, was to create some sort of normalization between like AFUE and COP. And in some discussions with some folks at PNNL and others, they indicated that that they had ways that could possibly be done.
And again, like how then is that different from the way HO2 currently reads?
Because HO2 is comparing, so every equipment efficiency would be compared to the minimum efficiency equipment, like the lowest efficiency equipment that can be selected under C403, which is the minimum efficiency non-electric equipment. H02 is comparing the efficiency relative to the baseline efficiency of the equipment that you chose. Like, so if I were to
let me take a shot at this. This feels like it's almost fuel switching credit.
It's what? Sorry?
Almost like it's a fuel switching credit.
Not necessarily, because it would still give you
Not
credit for
necessarily,
higher
but-
efficiency gas
Right.
equipment.
It's not necessarily that, but I think I understand what you're saying. Sorry.
Elizabeth, is that, I don't know if that
No,
helped at
I'm
all.
sorry. I still don't see the difference. So like I look at HO2 right now, and what I see is where equipment exceeds the minimum annual heating efficiency by more than 5%, you get extra credit using this equation based on sort of the, if it's at least 5% better, and then if it's better than 5% better, you get extra credit. So I don't see how this is different.
So I think our understanding, Kristen, I saw you come off. I don't know if you maybe have a different way of explaining it than what I'm trying to say.
I'll say why I like this. I like this because so I'm involved right now in the DOE commercial building heat pump accelerator, and there's some really interesting case studies of commercial buildings that are using heat pumps if any board members want to go take a look at that. But I like this because I think there are some commercial building designers who are going to look at this credit and be like, all electric, I can't do that, and just pass it by. Whereas this would allow someone to specify a heat pump for a commercial building that maybe has a small gas backup and still get some credit. I think it goes probably further towards the debiasing goal that we have, depending on the ultimate way that it's designed. So I hope that, and I support this, but I hope that in the end, CEO does give more credit to people who do elect to go all electric and the highest efficiency. But this still opens the door for people to earn points, even if they're not going full bore.
But I think that's what HO2 already does. So we're saying that this credit would replace HO2, and I do not see how it is different from the current HO2.
So Elizabeth, maybe the way that Johnny described it in the Q&A might help. So HO2 is currently based on a relative baseline of efficiency to the equipment you chose. So if the building was originally
and you mean
going
by
to
like system type.
by
So whatever
system
your
type.
whatever your design system type is, so is your baseline system type.
Right. Whereas what we are saying is this credit would be based entirely on the minimum baseline that could exist, the absolute baseline minimum. And so it's no longer comparing the efficiency improvement that you have over the relative equipment that you had chosen. It's the relative efficiency that you have gained over the minimum absolute baseline that could exist.
And how do we define that?
I think we will define that based on whatever the lowest equivalent. So we will have to create some of that equivalency between electric performance and gas performance, or non-electric performance, because there's other equipment options here. But then we will look at which one essentially is the minimum performance, set that as the baseline, the minimum efficiency performance as the baseline, and then anything that is selected that chooses a greater efficiency equipment that over that baseline would get credited based on how much more efficient that equiment is.
So that's
Sorry.
pretty open-ended. What does that mean? So like, let's say I choose a VRF system that's served by a DOAS. Or let's just make it really simple. Let's just say I have a heat pump, and maybe it's a really great heat pump. What is my heat pump baseline? Is it a PTAC? Is it electric resistance? What would that be?
Well, so that's the point, is it's not going to be compared anymore to the heat pump baseline. It's going to be compared to the overall baseline.
But what's the overall baseline?
I think that's what we're saying. We would ultimately have to determine which of those baselines is the minimum. Like I am acknowledging that there's definitely going to have to be some analysis that goes into determining what that would look like and how those credits are calculated based on that. But accounting for the assumption is probably that the gas furnace system is going to be the lowest efficiency. The minimum gas furnace equipment is going to be lowest efficiency. That's just an assumption, but we will determine whatever that is, determine the relative energy performance of that system as the baseline, and do some sort of calculation metric that would give you an equivalent efficiency of a system that you choose relative to that baseline. and credit it accordingly.
So you're almost thinking about comparing it on an energy use intensity basis. So you would say that a gas furnace has the highest site energy use intensity.
Right.
So we're comparing everything against a gas furnace. So now we are getting, for a VRF system, which has a very high COP for heating, we would get a ton of credits. And for an electric unit heater, you would still get some credits because you are comparing it on a site energy use intensity basis.
Yes. Yes.
In theory. Okay.
In theory, yes.
I think I'd want to see more on what that means before saying that this could replace HO2, because that's a very different metric. And then, if you carry on that thinking, and if it's sort of EUI based, then why wouldn't we do that for cooling as well? I mean, I know that's all electricity, but if you're going to normalize things in one spot, I think we would need to normalize things in all spots. And I wouldn't want to necessarily replace the credits as they already exist necessarily, because then again, we've got C407 alignment issues. That could potentially be a different option if we're going to add a site energy metric to C407. But then I think it should be separate credits, not replacing the credits, unless we're going to get rid of the energy costs. The way that the C407 baselines are defined is by system type. So, we have to, we can certainly have options there, but
Yeah.
I think this needs some more discussion.
And I think
pass it over to Jess if you guys don't mind.
Yeah.
We do need to kind of wrap up
Yeah,
this
thank you.
discussion. So thanks so much, Elizabeth. Jess, did you have any thoughts you want to share?
Just an initial question, because most of my code experience is on the residential side. So commercially, if you're using the least efficient, heating system as your baseline for credit on this, is there a risk of rewarding people who just kind of like go above that base minimum? And what I mean by that is, like, when we talk to like builders in Summit County, they're like, well, no one's installing anything that's 80% AFUE, right? Whether it's a boiler or a furnace. So they're like, it doesn't even matter. So, do you run that risk on the commercial side where it's like, well, no one is installing this like federal minimum, and so rewarding something that's just one notch up from that is just kind of like really like scraping the bottom of the efficiency barrel, as it were?
I can say in my experience, I have a lot of projects that want to install the very bare code minimum, and I got to really to get them above it commercially.
Yeah.
Great.
If
There
anybody
you
has
go.
other experience, feel free to add to that.
And I think, Jess, I mean, there's only so much you can do about that, because like there's a difference between perhaps what the actual practice of what people install versus what code minimum and what federal minimums require. And we can only really base our decisions and credit options on what the minimum option is. Like, they could choose that. And so I guess to some degree, yes, you still would want them to have a little bit of credit, and recognizing that, the gap, the variance between, like, let's just say like 80% of, efficient gas equipment versus 96% efficient, there's like not a huge efficiency gap there, and probably wouldn't be a lot of points or credits benefit here, versus like if you're choosing a 300% efficient heat pump system, then, the credit variance there is going to be much more significant. So I guess, Elizabeth, to your concern, just trying to wrap this up really quick. I think what we could do is put together more of like a clear idea of what this looks like in the first commercial draft, and we could revisit this if the board is at least amenable to considering this option. We could revisit it after the first draft is out and see if like what we put together makes sense. I mean, does that seem fair, at least? Because remember, whatever we decide here is not the end.
What we're going to do is we're going to do a straw poll to see
That's what I mean.
he wants to do.
Yeah.
So the options, and I'm gonna move us to straw poll because we do need to continue on in our discussion today. So let's have 3 options in our straw poll today. We'll do, yes, we want this a draft of this to show up in the commercial draft code of what this would look like. So that's a vote yes. If you vote no, this is saying I don't like this proposal, and let's not go with the change that Adam is suggesting here. I think it would still keep the proposal that we voted in yes at the last meeting, but it would basically scrap this change. And then I'm going to have an abstain vote because I still think there's a little bit of confusion, and I don't want to force board members into one camp or the other if this is not totally clicking. And I apologize, we can't spend more time on it. So we'll do a hand raise poll. If you would like to add this in the first draft of the commercial code, or at least some version of it to get it fleshed out, please raise your hand. Okay, keep your hands up. I'm just doing a quick count. All right, we've got 8 hands up for yes. Thank you, guys. You can lower your hands. You would not like, oh, Kevin, where are you? Okay, thank you. You would not like to have to make this change to the new credit that we had voted in last time. Please raise your hand now. Okay, Tim, I see you. So that's one vote no. And then if any board members would like to abstain from voting today, please raise your hands. Okay. Awesome. So I have 6 hands for abstain, 1 for no, and 8 for yes. So following our simple majority, we will propose some version of this into that first draft. Please note that, and remember that as we get you guys that first draft, there will be many times to iterate through this and an opportunity to scrap it if at that point folks understand it better and don't like where it's landed. And I would just, Johnny had some helpful notes in the Q&A, so folks can go take a look at that too if they want to see, I think, how that proposal is being considered. Excuse me. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our final sort of 2 big decisions that we need to make for C406 today. The first decision here is going to be the structure of the tables. And at the last board meeting, we talked a lot about the potential of combining them, implications of that. And so hopefully you all had a chance to take a look at the resource that Elizabeth helped put together to help visualize what it would look like with those 2 tables coming together. So that's going to be the first part of our discussion. And that'll be a pretty big chunk of today. And then we'll move on to our second discussion, which is, do we want what's the total amount of credits we want to require within these tables? So we'll start with decision 1 here, which is, do we combine these tables or not? And sort of as we see them, our 2 options that we've discussed to date are keep the tables as they are or combine the 2 tables into one. So option 1, if we keep the 2 tables as they're written, as a reminder, this includes the allowance for additional efficiency credits to be used to achieve the renewable energy and load management credits without any limit. So you can use all efficiency to gain all of your points in the 2 tables if you'd like. And then on the renewable energy and load management, credit options can be used with some limit to apply towards the additional efficiency. So that's the information we covered at the start of this meeting. So if we keep the tables as they are, both of those rules still apply. Option 2 would be that we combine the tables. So additional efficiency, renewable energy, and load management credits would all be able to be used to achieve a single point value in a single table. We did want to note that we think that this would have some impacts to C407, and we're not going to talk about the impacts to C407 unless it's in the context of figuring out what we want to do here. We've saved time for the specific C407 discussions at the end of today's meeting, so please keep that in mind. But how combining the tables could impact C407 is that we would need to change C407 to remove the renewable energy and load management requirements. And then the required energy cost savings in C407 would likely increase due to the combined points from C406 affecting the calculation that tells you how much energy cost savings you need to earn in C407, which is based on the total amount of additional efficiency credits in C406. Carolyn.
Thanks, Kim. I was curious if we have, or if it would be possible before we make a final decision, meaning adopt code, to understand the cost implications of that incremental point difference by including the RELM credit that increment of points requirements?
I certainly think we can log that. I guess my understanding, now that we understand that the credits for additional efficiency can roll over without limit to apply towards the renewable energy and load management credits. Adam and I sort of understanding, and Adam, I'll let you jump in here, and Anna's understanding is that fundamentally combining the tables will not really change the outcome of the code so much, because projects would still have the flexibility to basically pull in any renewable energy, load management, or additional efficiency credits to earn that single point. In C407, it could have some implications in that the energy cost savings percentage would be higher. But then you'd also have, it's higher, but in the scenario where we keep the tables separate, you still have to do the renewable energy load management credits. So it's sort of, the outcome to us is sort of like, it's not changing much. I think the fundamental thing that would change here is this, the structure and the sort of view of this credit. I
think I got more confused. So my understanding as structured is you have to earn at least so many points from 406 or from the first table, and then you have to earn so many points from the second. You can carry extra credits over from the first to meet the requirements of the second. Right.
And you can carry, and you may have missed this, I don't know if you were on.
No, or you can carry points from the second towards compliance with the first, which I'm not as excited about, just to be clear. I think the first table is the foundational one. It's the efficiency one that I think is kind of I'll call it the sacred cow. And I'm concerned about things, but can be convinced that it's okay as it's structured. But my question is that, there's one choice where we just keep the one table and the points that are associated with that, or we have the two tables and you have to get the cumulative points between them by working across them. So I'm just curious if there's any information we have about that points difference and what it means in terms of incremental cost or savings benefit, right? So what's it getting us?
Yeah, we did run some numbers to see what in the combined tables, what the new C407 cost savings percentage would be. And so we can get to that in just 1 second, Caroline.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to go through one more quick slide, and then and then we'll kind of dive into the discussion. So other things to consider if we combine the tables is that the current base code has a limit on renewable energy and load management credit carryover, as we've talked about. And there has been a concern expressed by the board about allowing too many renewable energy and load management credits to be counted as additional efficiency credits. And I think, Carolyn, this is the concern you just brought up. So something to consider if we do combine the tables, and this will be a question that we will get to after we settle on where the tables will land. But the future question is, would the board want to set limits on, if in a combined table scenario, on how many renewable energy and load management credits could be applied or would be able to be used to earn that total point count. So again, I'm just going to keep this up here so we kind of have a way of looking at it. And then if you guys want to, if you want us to move to any of those tables, we can show you those calculations because we've got them ready. So Kevin, I will turn over to you.
Thanks. I am having audio trouble. Somebody made mention of the fact that the commentary is only going to address the C406 and C407 tables as they are right now. I haven't had a chance to look. The commentary is not out with
shoot, Kevin, is anybody else? Kevin, you froze for a little bit there.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm not in my usual spot. Things are not set up quite right.
Well, you're thawed now.
Yeah, you're coming through a lot clearer now.
You're thawed now. You're not frozen, you're thawed.
Oh. Can you hear me on this one or not?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. So the question was just, have we seen, do we know if the commentary is out yet? I think one of the concerns that was raised last time was that
I think you're good.
Mute your
Sorry
speakers
about
at the laptop.
am I okay now?
Yes.
Okay, I see Hope said no commentary is out yet. One of the concerns raised last time was that the commentary is going to specifically address these tables as separate entities. And I just didn't know if we knew anything more about that yet. Sorry for the audio trouble.
Anna, Hope, or Adam, do you guys have any insights on that? Okay.
I mean, I can only assume that the commentary is going to address the code as the code is published. So if we make changes to that, then we will have to make adjustments to commentary or other things to address those changes, is my assumption.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, Elizabeth.
Yeah, so just full disclosure here, I'm in favor of combining the tables mostly for simplicity of the design community. I know Adam, you guys in the team looked into the equivalency of points. Like if we combine the tables, are they weighted the same? And I think you answered that as a yes, because you can take your extra from the first table and apply it to the second table and vice versa. So those are already interchangeable. There was also concern from the board about having too many renewable load management credits replace energy efficiency credits. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong there, but I think most of that concern is about using too much solar, like, putting lipstick on a pig, right? That we don't want to use too much solar to make up for energy efficiency. So one of my questions there, and I'm wondering if you all have answers, is what is the cap on the renewable energy credits, if there is one, and specifically like RO1. I think, and we could put a cap on that to ensure that that doesn't happen. And I think you'd probably want to do that regardless, whether we kept separate tables or combined the tables, so that you're not just doing so much renewable energy that we're missing out on the goals of the grid healthiness of the load management credits. So I think that's probably a concern either way, but one that can be mitigated within RO1, the renewable energy credit specifically. That also needs to be all aligned with the mandatory, whether we take out the mandatory solar requirement. So, that credit needs some examination regardless. And I think, but I think that concern about, too many credits replacing energy efficiency can absolutely be managed within that credit and needs to be managed within that credit, regardless of which way the board decides to do here. And one other point, and then I'll shut up. As to the support of the commentary, I think Colorado Energy Office probably we need to provide some extra support to this regardless. As soon as we change a single credit here or add a single credit, we have to create our own resource that replaces ComCheck. So as soon as we've done that, we are, creating a new tool, a new spreadsheet. We're going to have our own support around those credits. It's not fair to ask the community to then go from one resource to another. I think we need to have our own resource around C406. If we touch any of it, which I assume, that's what we're here for, right? So I think we can still provide that support within this new tool that's being created. And then combining the tables and having our own tool and our own, commentary, if you will, or support around these credits can take whatever is created in the commentary and then, make it Colorado specific and even improve upon it for things that we are editing. Thank you.
Thanks.
So to Elizabeth's first point, the table that limits renewable and load management carryover is table C406.1.1 two. And so, for example, a commercial multifamily building in climate zone 5B can only carry over 5 points from the renewables and load management credits to use under the energy efficiency credits.
Thanks, Anna. And it is still, if we choose to combine the tables in this first straw poll, it is still an open question that we will discuss immediately after this on whether or not we want to set those limits for the renewable energy credits. So know that if we move in that direction, that's what we will be talking about immediately following. Really quick, I want to just switch to addressing Carolyn. I think this was your question of, did we run the numbers to see what the percent savings increase might be in C407? So I'm going to orient us really quick. So this is, and I'm not going to get the table's numbers, but this is the additional efficiency credit table as it stands in the code right now. And this is the total number of credits you would have to achieve solely for energy efficiency. This does not include the renewable energy and load management credits. So, and currently the current base code, this is the efficiency credit. So I'll just give you guys a moment to look at that. And then remember that the C407% savings you must achieve is based on the total number of points in that additional efficiency table. And so this is that, and you guys have seen this slide, but this is the percent savings that those point values equate to for all of these different building types in all of the different climate zones. And this is as it stands currently in the code. So if we move to a combined table scenario, this is what that table would look like if you have additional efficiency and renewable energy load management credits all in one table. So this just took the number from the efficiency table and added it to the number from the renewable energy and load management table to get these numbers. And then the thing that would change in this scenario is that C407 calculation would be based now on the total points in this table. So it would be based on that additional sort of including the renewable energy load management points. So if we look at what that new percent savings would be in a combined table scenario, this is where we land. So you see roughly, I would say, like a 2 to 4 to 5% jump across the board.
I think when Anna looked at it first, it was an average of about 3% energy cost savings across the board increase, right, Anna?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think, Carolyn, I think this was the data you were asking for. If I misunderstood, hope now you guys have all at least seen this.
So that's the cost savings portion, and I think part of my question is around what's the incremental cost of getting that extra 3% savings, and do they balance out or not, I guess is my question.
Yeah, Elizabeth, did you want to answer? Did you have another question?
Yeah, I think maybe I can answer that in maybe with the, I know we're not intending to talk too much about C407, but as you can imagine, I have a lot of opinions about C407. There's just a lot of things in C407 that currently do not align with C406. I mean, without even, talking about combining the tables, like you can get credits for things in C406 that you are not allowed to claim savings for in C407. Honestly, I feel like C407, that people just ran out of gas and it was an afterthought. And they're like, okay, we're going to achieve a percent savings and it's going to align with C406, but they didn't align the modeling protocol with things you can claim savings for. So we need to, I think, review that and make that align better. And I think these savings can absolutely be achieved if we do truly align C406 and C407. Like one of my suggestions, if we combine this table, is that you let modelers take credit for load management and renewable energy things in the same manner as the credits allow. So, like claim the savings for thermal energy storage. Like you're not allowed to do that in C407 right now. So by changing it into savings instead of just a check the box, it does let you think about things more holistically and figure out what is going to benefit that building the best. And that's the whole goal of C407 is to optimize your building based on, well, in this case, energy cost, and maybe we add a site energy metric. But to make those things align, I don't think there's any cost impact.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Anna, did you have anything you wanted to add on any sort of
Yeah. So kind of as we were looking through this, the issue that we found was that you can use the additional energy efficiency in C406 to apply to those renewable and load management credits. So you could build a really efficient building and get out of providing any sort of load management. And the same doesn't go for C407. So under the original code, you have to achieve a certain percent savings and then also provide the renewable and load management credits. So what we are, and what I think Elizabeth is talking about here too, is allowing additional energy efficiency to be used to offset some of those renewable and load management credits. So in my opinion, it's actually a cost savings for buildings which are applying under section C407, because some of those renewable and load management credits are very expensive to install. So it's just a consideration that they could provide additional energy efficiency to offset some of those load management credits. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, this is all helpful. I think I want to make sure we're being just deliberate around making sure about that. If we're going to adopt something that increases or results in the highest point requirements, I just want to make sure that we're feeling good that the benefits align with the cost.
Thanks, Carolyn. Yeah, Kim, I see your hand up.
I was just curious, can you flip back to the original charts and then the comparison? Because what I think I saw was that climates, I'm just thinking high altitude mountain community climates like I am, that the original charts here have increased point requirements for zone 6B and 7, like it increases as you get colder, and then once it was combined, that wasn't the case, unless I read it wrong.
So it's gonna be a little bit of I'll flip between, but yeah, I'm sorry, do you want to join?
I was just going to say, generally speaking, not exclusively, but most cases, you're seeing a consistent trend across the board when they're combined. So like, let's take like R2, R4, and R1, or an I1 credits. Kim, if you can go back to the first one, like you're seeing in those lower climate zones, the numbers are decreasing. And then you look at the first row of the combined table and the numbers are also decreasing. Part of the reason why there might be a couple of like reversal of the trend only comes from the fact that the renewable and load management credits are not always necessarily the same trend as the additional efficiency credits, if that makes sense, Kim. So like in some cases, like they increase as you get to colder climates, whereas the additional efficiency credits do the opposite, they decrease, right? And so like sometimes when you add them together, it will change the trend because of the direction that they went in those two separate tables. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really actually change what you would have had to do, because you still would have had to meet the credits in both of those tables anyway, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, I guess I was thinking I understood why the numbers would have switched direction as to whether they're increasing or decreasing, but not sure if that would influence the, I guess, overall performance of how a building could end up. I'm wanting to make sure that we're cognizant of whether that would or not with those regarding buildings in different climate zones.
Yeah. And I think, to be clear too, I think ultimately, and I think Elizabeth we've tried to make this point, is that really under a combined credit table option under C406, I think C407 is different and we'll talk about that. But C406, you could basically do the same thing if you wanted to comply with C406, whether or not the tables were separate or whether they were together. Like if you had to achieve 90 credits under the first table and 40 credits under the second table, if they were combined, you could still achieve 90 credits for additional efficiency and 40 credits for renewables and load management. But You could also do more efficiency, which you could have done anyway because of those exceptions that we talked about, and the reverse. So like, I think that that's what we're trying to say, I think, is that ultimately combining the tables for the purposes of C406 doesn't change a lot about what is required or what could be done. It just makes it more streamlined, simpler to have it all in one table, I think is the argument that Elizabeth is making.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, guys, so I think I would like to move us to a straw poll on this. And know that if we decide with, if the board majority vote runs with option 2, we'll move immediately into a discussion of if we want to have any limits on renewable energy and load management credits. So keep that in mind, that that's still an open discussion. So we'll do a yes, no, and abstain vote for this one as well. Just again, want to make sure that I'm not forcing board members into a side they don't feel comfortable with. So
Hey, Kim, I'm sorry. I just want to make one clarification before you do this. Sorry. So, the point that I made about the allowing the energy efficiency credit from C407 to achieve renewable and load management credits, we can make that change to section C407 without combining the tables. So I don't want you guys to base your vote off of the idea that it's benefiting section C407 to combine the tables. It's really just an administrative, make the code easier to read change.
thank you for that clarification. That's really helpful, Anna. Okay, so we'll do again hand raise vote. So we'll vote first for option 1, then we'll vote for option 2, and then we'll vote see if any board members want to abstain from voting. So if you would like to,
Kim, can you move to the slide where it shows those options?
Got 3 screens and I'm not used to this. So here
I want to make sure everyone has it very clearly in front of them which one is option 1 and which one is option 2.
Thank you, sir. So if you would like to vote for option 1 to just keep the C406 tables as they are, please raise your hand. A moment to make sure all hand members are up. Okay, awesome. So we have 3 votes for option 1. Thank you all. You can lower your hands. If you would like to vote for option 2 to combine the tables in C406, please raise your hand. Okay, awesome. Thanks everyone. Okay, I see 10 hands up in support of option 2. You guys can lower your hands. And then if any board members would like to abstain from voting, please raise your hand now. Okay, awesome. Thank you guys. I see 2 abstains. Okay, so to review the results again, option 1 had 3 votes, option 2 had 10 votes, and abstaining had 2 votes. So we will go ahead and in this first draft of the code, do the combine the tables in C406. So that leads us into our next question to the board, which is if the board combines the tables, which we have just with the majority vote selected to move forward with, how would we like to manage the renewable energy and load management credits? So 2 options that we sort of see as presented here. We can, in a combined table, add a limit for the amount of renewable energy and load management credits that could apply towards that total points required. Or we don't have any limits and we kind of keep that open flexibility, allowing folks to use any one of the additional efficiency, renewable energy, or load management credits to earn their total points. So before we straw poll, would love to open up to the board if there are any thoughts on this, any questions, or any kind of comments. Elizabeth.
Within our option 1 here, I mean, I think most of the RELM credits, with the exception of RO1, which is our actual solar, most of those are pretty expensive. So I don't see concerns with, overusing or over applying those. I mean, I think I will vote for option 1, but I would like that to be just within the renewable energy credit itself.
Okay,
thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. So that's maybe like option 1A. We can throw out.
Yeah, but I think it can be done within that.
Okay. Yeah, Carolyn.
Yeah, I think Elizabeth got my point. And just a clarification, this is if we combine the tables, which it seems like there was some vote to do then yeah, I mean, I definitely feel strongly that we need to limit anything that we think displaces makes it easier to meet the code without doing the efficiency, which is where we really want to preserve. And so I think limiting renewables is a good option specifically.
Okay, thanks, Carolyn. So I'm kind of hearing that you're agreeing with Elizabeth of like, let's add a limit, but maybe apply it just to renewable energy credits. Okay, awesome, thank you. Any other board members have any thoughts on this? Whether they're a fully baked thought or not, we'd love to hear it.
I would just add that I think I agree with the previous two speakers that I don't see any need to limit load management, but I do support limiting the use of on-site renewables or renewable energy credits.
Okay, thanks, Will. And I'm just seeing Brad's note in the chat that he is in agreement as well. Okay, any other board comments, questions? I'll if not, I'll kind of edit the slide to get a option 1A in there that we can vote on. But Adam.
I just might ask Elizabeth, or not Elizabeth, sorry, Anna. Elizabeth, you were on my screen, so I was looking at you. Anna, I wonder if you could speak to, so there had been some questions about whether or not the renewable energy credits in the renewable energy and load management table were maximums, or whether or not that was just like a multiplier, like you can multiply those credits based on how much renewable energy you use. I believe our understanding is that you can get more points in that credit than what is in that table,
Yes.
correct? And so
Correct.
I think that's where the board would need to determine. I think once we answer this question, what those limits look like is because the renewable energy essentially, in theory, you could add as much renewable energy and get as many credits as possible. Obviously, I think there's like literal like physical limits to that about like how much you could actually do, but still, I just wanted to make that clarification that that's, I think, where the limits need to come in, because that renewable energy credit could theoretically roll forever.
Yeah, technically. So the minimum for credit R01 is 0.1 watts per gross square foot of building area. The credit allows you to calculate how many points you achieve just based on the capacity on actual total rating of the wattage of your renewable system. So there is no maximum to the number of credits that you can achieve through credit R01. It's just based on the amount of points that you can roll over into the energy efficiency table. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted everyone to have that context about like when we're talking about setting renewable limits, that's why, is because the credits that are allowed there are not actually maximums.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam. Okay. Final call for any board comments, questions on this. Yeah, Tom.
Thanks. I think I'm missing something with the intent on this. I mean, just looking at the, if there's equipment efficiency requirements versus renewable energy, if somebody's putting in very cheap, inefficient equipment, they're doing it to save first cost. And it seems like that personality or that ethic wouldn't be putting in a bunch of solar panels to not have to pay the incremental cost of more efficient equipment. So I guess I don't understand the intent of the limitation on renewables and load management.
Thanks, Tom. I guess, Adam, I'm happy to try to answer. Do you have any thoughts?
I would maybe just turn to, Elizabeth or Carolyn, at what you would expect to see in that situation and why you would think there needs to be limits there.
Yeah, I can offer, we certainly saw in Boulder's code that designers would just put a bunch more solar on the roof at the expense of efficiency improvements. And first and foremost, we need to be maximizing efficiency here. So we don't want to see something that may appear easy, an easy way to comply, displacing something that delivers meaningful long-term savings to building occupants.
Thanks, Carolyn. Tom, does that answer your question, or do you have a follow-up thought you want to share? Oh, you're
Tom.
I can definitely see how it would make it easier, but if they're trying to save costs by complying with renewable energy, I guess that's the scenario that I'm not really understanding. It seems like it would always be cheaper to put in more efficient equipment and then less renewable energies.
I can just add a little bit to that. And one thing that we've seen is some people avoiding first construction costs, but then coming up with some really complicated and inventive financing mechanisms for renewable energy systems that where the I don't really understand how the money actually works, but they're not paying it as first costs, and it's sort of getting kicked down the can. So that actually is avoids that initial first construction cost that has straightforward financing in favor of these very complicated financing models for renewable energy systems. And so they're kind of pushing that financial responsibility down the road, and it's not part of the original development costs.
Awesome. Thanks, Ron, for that. And thanks for that question, Tom. Kim, I'll go to you next.
Yeah, I'll just chime in on that. Most of my work is on the residential side, but a lot of the residential homes are larger than our commercial buildings here. And I'll just say that there are quite a few projects where people would rather not explore the option of heat pumps and the added cost of that type of mechanical equipment or reducing their glazing of their buildings in order to comply with the energy performance. They'd rather just put solar on the roof as a way of kind of having their cake and eating it too. So we try to address that through the same type of thing of having a limitation on and requiring energy efficiency first. So.
Awesome. Thanks, Kim. Okay, cool. Well, I think if it's okay with folks, I'm going to move on to a straw poll here because we still have our second sort of big question for C406 to get through. So I've added an option 1A to this slide, which I hope reflects the intent of just adding, we want to add limits, but we want to just put them on the renewable credits. So if you would like to, again, we're in a combined table scenario because we just voted that in. Add limits for renewable energy and load management credits, you'll vote for option 1. If you would like to add limits for only renewable energy credits, you'll vote for option 1A. And I could have just made that simpler by making it 2, but here we are. And then if you don't want to add any limits to renewable energy or load management credits, you'll vote for option 2. And then I'll also just include an abstain vote so we can keep that consistent throughout. So if you would like to vote in favor of option 1 to add limits for both renewable energy and load management credits, please raise your hand. Okay, I see no hands raised. Thank you, everyone. If you would like to vote for option 1A to add limits for only renewable energy credits, please raise your hand. Okay, let me just count your hands. That's 11. Okay, thanks, everyone. You guys can lower your hands. And then if you'd like to vote for option 2 to not add any limit for renewable energy or load management credits, please raise your hand. Okay. Thank you, guys. I see 3 hands up for option 2. And then any board members that would like to abstain for voting, please. Okay, thank you. I see 1 abstain. Okay, so in review, option 1 received 0 votes. Option 1A received 11 votes. Option 2 received 3 votes, and abstaining, 1 board member abstained from voting. So it sounds like there is a majority to move forward with combining the tables and adding limits for only renewable energy credits. So again, for board members that are voted against this, there will be many iterations to review this and see how it lands, but this will be how we make adjustments to C406 in our first commercial draft. All right, we are making awesome progress today, so thank you guys. So appreciate it. The next big question we have for C406, and this will bring us right up to our 10:45 break, is the decision on whether we want to raise or lower the required points in C406 using one of the appendix options or a different option. other than the appendix. So again, the reason we are talking about this is because it was brought up as a proposal by a board member to use the 1.25 multiplier for buildings without heat pumps to apply to the credit tables. So as we look at our options here, option one is that we combine them. We have the combined point table and we don't do anything to the points in that table. Option two is to use a multiplier to increase the points required for buildings. And there are two multipliers on the table, a 1.25 multiplier for buildings without heat pumps, and a 1.4 multiplier for all buildings. Now, the way that this multiplier would work, and I'm going to explain the concept, and then we've got some math slides, but hopefully the concept helps everybody understand. In the current version of the 2024 IECC with the separate tables, these multipliers from the appendices only apply to the additional efficiency credits. And so when we're talking about combining the tables and adding a multiplier, the way that we would do that math is to take the subset of credits in our combined table that were for additional efficiency, apply the multiplier to that number of points, and then add in the renewable energy and load management points on top of it. So the multiplier would not go to both additional efficiency and renewable energy and load management. It would still only apply to the subset of points for additional efficiency.
So if you let's go to slide 24, because we show the math, or the slide that shows them. Next one, sorry. Sorry guys, we prepared everything as if the tables could be separate or as if they could be combined. So we have it all in here. But since we have decided to combine them, I just wanted to show everybody, like I showed the math here so that everyone can kind of see more clearly as to what we're talking about. So if we're talking about the 1.25 multiplier, originally under the code, the efficiency credits required 9. We're talking just, I gave an example for a multifamily building in climate zone 5B, just picked that one out. The efficiency credits that were required were 90 credits, and the renewable energy and load management credits were 33. So now that we've decided to combine them, the total number of credits required for that section was 123. So you can see that since the 1.25 multiplier only applies to buildings that don't use heat pumps, buildings that use heat pumps would only have to meet that minimum number. The 90 plus 33 is 123 credits. For mixed fuel buildings, the multiplier would apply. And so you can see there in the calculation, the total number of credits is 146. We're only multiplying that 90, that original efficiency credit number, by the 1.25. And then you're adding the 33 for the renewable and load management credits on top. So just trying to give kind of a visual of that calculation that Kim was just explaining, where the multiplier still only applies to what that original, an additional efficiency credit number was, and then the renewable energy and load management is added on top of that, because that was the intent of those multipliers when they were created in those appendices.
Thanks, Adam. Tim, and then we'll go to Carolyn.
Yeah, thank you. This is great that you put an example that I've been dealing with a lot, R2s under the 21 and would be the 24. So I've got two large multifamily projects that are essentially all electric except the gas-fired pool boilers, which are really big, million BTUs for each one. So with a project like that, would this, let's say if you did the 1.25 or 1.4 multiplier, I guess I would have to classify that building as a mixed fuel building because it does have one appliance that is gas, and then the whole building would have to comply. Would that be how you'd read that?
So I can clarify that a little bit. So in the language of the code, which we don't have here, so I'm sorry I can't show you that, but the language of the code only applies it for if heat pumps are not used for space heating and surface water heating. So in the example of pool heating, I don't know that that would fall under a building that would require, like if they used heat pumps for space heating and surface water heating, they would still be able to follow the regular baseline, is my understanding.
Pools fall under service water.
Do they?
heating.
Okay. Okay. Well, in that case, then never mind. Good to know. I was not aware that they were under service water heating. So then yes, Tim, in that case, then yes, they would be classified as a mixed fuel building.
Okay. Yeah, that just made up my mind. Thank you.
Yeah. And for folks who want to follow along, and I apologize for the screen switching, Appendix CF in section 103.1 is where this multiplier shows up, if you guys want to take a look at that language. Carolyn, and then Elizabeth.
Thanks. And then I think that was a really illustrative discussion. So I think, I appreciate the thought here in that it's one of the mechanisms to attempt to de-bias against what we know is an underlying bias in the current approach that uses energy cost as the indicator of compliance. So I just want to name that an alternative to that, remains to specify that it has to be an energy-based model and rely on, and I'm going to get the references wrong, but leaning into is it ASHRAE, somebody help me out. Somebody knows this number. We just talked about it yesterday, Adam.
Oh, 90.1.
Yeah.
The Appendix I. Yeah.
Appendix I, thank you. So, I think we want to do something here to really lend itself to the de-biasing point. I think we should evaluate like which makes it easier, which makes it the most defensible in terms of our strategy. But I certainly support the concept of trying to level the playing field because we know that there's inherent bias right now in the design of the code.
Thanks, Carolyn. Elizabeth.
Yeah, a couple things. When we say buildings designed with heat pumps, we've had some discussions with my engineering colleagues about, well, what does that mean? It can get really complicated with larger buildings and more complicated HVAC systems when you do introduce an electric resistance element. So, what does that mean? If we were to take something that is quote using heat pumps, I would just simplify that, because how do you define what's using heat pumps versus using electric resistance preheat or backup, or a minimum COP or something, and I would just make that be electric rather than heat pump, because the rest of the code will do its job. You can't have an all electric resistance building and comply with the code. You can let the rest of the code sort that out, and you can totally simplify that by just saying electric versus non-electric. But that notwithstanding, there are many building types that would not be able to do this. I would prefer more of a carrot versus a stick approach to that. And now I'm kind of circling back to the first credit that we reviewed about maybe normalizing heating efficiency in that manner. I think it would be interesting to have that maybe be another credit option that projects that want to pursue more efficient electrification could benefit from in that way, rather than penalizing projects that maybe have no choice, like healthcare labs. We don't have all electric options for those building types, commercial kitchen equipment, that kind of thing. Those are huge penalties for little gas uses that I think adding a 25% or 40% penalty to those projects is unfair.
Sorry, and just to add to that really quickly, Elizabeth, process loads aren't included in the mixed fuel definition. So if you have, for example, propane or natural gas in a lab, or you have natural gas commercial kitchen equipment, that wouldn't be included in the mixed fuel definition.
Okay, that's good to know for commercial kitchens, but even for, I was mostly referring to the HVAC equipment for the labs and healthcare, because the heating loads are just too high for heat pumps. Our current heat pump technology cannot accommodate it. We have to have boilers. We have to have boilers that heat water at 180 degrees, and there are no heat pump boiler options that do that at this time.
Okay, thanks, Elizabeth. Will?
Yeah, so, I'm very supportive of the approach of requiring the 1.25 multiplier for mixed fuel buildings. And for me, it's not only about de-biasing, but it's, both going back to some of the original conversation we had early in the code development about a broad interest in kind of an electric preferred code. I think this helps to move us in that direction. But more fundamentally, I mean, when I think back to the legislative direction which is really to maximize carbon reductions consistent with maintaining housing affordability, given, where we're headed on the electric generation side, where, by 2030, statewide, we're going to average about an 85% reduction in emissions from the electric system, and that's with gross and electricity use. So the actual intensity reductions will be larger than that. Whereas, even with a little bit of RNG added to the mix, there's essentially no reduction, happening on the intensity, or very little reduction happening in the intensity on the gas side. I really don't see how we can really comply with the direction to try to maximize carbon reductions in this code without having electric preferred approach. And certainly, would be open if there are other mechanisms that could achieve this. But in terms of what I've seen to date, this seems to me like the simplest approach to beginning to move in that direction. So, if we were to not do this, I think it would be very important to come up with, well, what's the alternative approach to doing that actually complies with our legislative mandate.
Thanks, Will. Yeah, Rob.
I guess I would have some concerns about whether adding this appendix to the model code, what effect would that have on adoption? Because I think that this is I understand the state's policy goals, and generally this kind of aligns with what our corporate goals are too. But if we add this and that subsequently makes it difficult or unlikely that communities are going to adopt this as their model code, it's going to limit the impact of the code across the entire state.
Thanks, Rob.
Hey, could I ask a question on that? So, Rob, I'm trying to understand, because there's a legal requirement that when local governments update any element of their code, they have to adopt a code at least as strong as this. So is your concern that it will cause local governments to simply not adopt any new building codes? Because
yes,
if they do,
okay. I think it's our experience that we see that currently. That in lieu of adopting an energy code, AHJs simply choose not to update their codes because they find this code onerous. The current energy code.
Thanks, Rob. Kim, I'll go to you next.
I was just going to chime in that I can confirm that can be the case for small jurisdictions, or, that have a hard time enforcing the current code that they might be on as it is. But I can't say, and I'm curious to learn more about whether any of this would prevent that and what other people's thoughts are.
Elizabeth?
Just one other thought. I want to be able to give partial credit for electrification and not limit it to an all or nothing. So I think this doesn't really achieve that, but if a building can get 70% of the way there, I want to find a way to reward that and incentivize that. Unfortunately, what an all or nothing approach does is, as soon as you have a pool, like let's use Tim's multifamily example, if that building has a pool and has to get all these credits anyway, they will try less hard. So there's an unintended consequence for making it very black and white like this. Whereas, if the pool is their only gas source, water heating source, and they can do everything else electric, I'd like to still reward that project for doing everything that they can do in that sense.
Okay, Thanks, Elizabeth. Any other questions or thoughts from the board? And before I try to summarize what folks are saying, Adam, and then we'll go to Kevin.
Well, I guess I would maybe turn that question back, I think, to Elizabeth about what does that look like then through code, about like incentivizing or encouraging them to do that. Because I think the response then that I'm hearing from a lot of folks is, well, we don't want that black and white option, so we're going to leave it to where it is now, which is not doing anything you just said either. It's not actually nudging them in the direction of electrification. And so that's where I guess my question is, like, where do you see, or anybody, you or anybody else, see that like nudging in that direction, but not necessarily like fully penalizing people?
Yeah, no, great point, Adam. And that's kind of why I was circling back then to our very first credit, which is now making a little more sense in my brain as it's been cooking for a while. In that, maybe that is a second option, in that the way we can normalize heating efficiency, and I would do water heating efficiency in the same way, by the way, to do the same kind of thing, and then weight that, for multifamily, for example, to do that sort of partial credit. The more electrification you do, the more credits you get. And I would do a sort of a carrot and a stick, not a penalizing kind of thing. So I'd rather do it in a credit format rather than you have to work harder. But I could also be talked into it. So I see there's a way that could be scaled perhaps, but I don't really love the idea of making people do more math to try to figure out how many points they have to get, but instead rather find different opportunities for achieving points, and then try to point that out within our tool, that those kinds of projects could have potentially a range of points. By the way, just as an aside, I think it's really helpful to see a top range of point potential. That jumps out to people rather than saying, okay, well, you can get a base 5 points for this, but then if you actually read the whole credit and do all the math, boy, you could actually get up to 25 points if you pursue this. When we create whatever this wonderful CEO tool is going to be, I'd like to let people see that potential, that, oh gosh, maybe you can get 25 points if you're truly a building with 100% electric space heating and 100% electric water heating, what have you, and that can be rewarded on a partial credit basis.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
So just to clarify that I understand what you're saying, just you would advocate for like the credit that we talked about earlier, and an equivalent water heating credit that would just make it easier, rather than requiring more points to be achieved if you don't do those, just make it easier to achieve the points that you're required to get if you do those. Just making sure. Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Thanks.
And I think we would capture more building types with that. Because there is an unintended consequence, and we're seeing this with Denver's code, by the way, because they have something very similar, that it is all or nothing. If you are an all electric property, then you can get, you don't have to get as many C406 points, you don't have to get as much energy savings. There are some projects that just cannot be that, and then they give up, they stop trying, because like, oh well, we can't get those credits anyway, so sure, I'll put in gas this and gas that, and this and that. So it is a little bit of an unintended consequence of being quite that strict. So I think we would be more successful with a partial credit kind of approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So I'm going to go Kevin, and then I think it was Rob, Kim, and then Will. So that will be our order, but Kevin, kick us off.
Thank you. Just a quick counterpoint. I have a high-rise multifamily project, developer-driven, very not great sustainability objectives. And this is just for context. It's like this can happen. They're choosing all electric as their compliance path, including the pool heating. And I get where you're coming from, Elizabeth, about the all or nothing could drive people away from that, but the all or nothing in this instance is actually driving somebody to a better decision. So it can go both ways. I don't know if that's like, if we're going to see that as a pattern, or if that's just like, hey, somebody's just kind of done a calculated choice and said that's the way we're going, that's the way it's got to be. So it's out there.
Awesome. No, thanks for that, Kevin. We'll go to Rob next.
Yeah, so just reviewing the appendix CF 103. What I think I would like to see is that we basically say, call it buildings with heat pumps, that if you install, in lieu of an air conditioner, you install a heat pump, even if it is sized for cooling, you don't have to meet the 1.25% additional credits. I think that has the opportunity to move that heat pump market forward, as in or to displace air conditioning with heat pumps. We start absorbing some of that heating load in the shoulder months when there's when generally speaking, electric loads on the system are a little bit lower. And I had a second point I was going to make. And when those heating loads, when the outdoor air temperature is really kind of optimal for that, to maximize that COP within those heat pumps. That's what I'd kind of like to see.
Okay, thanks, Rob. I appreciate you offering that other option, and I'm writing them down as I hear them from you all. So we'll kind of cover these as we hear from everybody. But Kim, next.
I appreciate this conversation because what came to mind when I first looked at the multipliers was, is there a way to have a ratio? And at the risk of complicating things, it might be very prudent to have some sort of scale. We're one of, at least our region here, in my experience, we're one of the we're one of the areas that's most difficult to provide with electrical power. So as strongly as I feel about encouraging buildings to become 100% electric as quickly as possible, until we have sufficient backup electrical service through battery storage and other resiliency methods, I currently don't discourage somebody from having at least some sort of backup natural gas or propane system, depending on where they're at, and depending on their community. Again, that's more of my experience with residential, but it applies commercially too, maybe even more so, for those buildings' reliance on being able to operate and have heat. So I just kind of wanted to add that into the conversation, that I really want to move forward as progressively and as fast as possible. And at the same time, we're on a path toward that, and it's not happening immediately.
Thanks, Kim. Yeah, appreciate that added context from the more rural parts of our state. Super helpful. Adam, or I'm sorry, not Adam, Will, I'll go to you next.
Thanks. This is a super interesting discussion, and I sort of really appreciate some of the nuance here. And just a couple of thoughts. I think that there might be an opportunity to both revisit that first credit and look at, being able to scale that with the degree of electrification and provide similar credit on the water heating side. But also would be very, very open to that notion of, perhaps we complicate the 1.25 to some extent, but structuring that where perhaps where it's not an all or nothing. I think Rob's suggestion was an interesting one. Another approach, which I think is what Kim was saying, would be to, have it be, I think, a scaling of the degree of additional credits that are required, so that if you're doing partial electrification, you don't have to do the full 25%. I think all of those could be interesting variants to explore that I think still move us in that direction of starting to incentivize the direction that we need to go on electrification. So there may be 3 or 4 different variants that could be combined here.
Thanks, Will. Awesome. I'll go to Carolyn.
Yeah, two things. First, starting, I'll build on Will's. One of the things that occurred to me is we had like that very real example from Tim about all electric building except for pool, and the clarification that pool heating is a service hot water. I mean, we have the opportunity to exclude things from the consideration where it's applied, right? So we can say service hot water except for these types of applications if we wanted to do that reward, but acknowledge that there may be certain loads that we don't want to trip. So just wanted to name that. And then to Kim's point, I just want to offer some extreme caution to us to make people believe that gas equipment provides resiliency in terms of outage. I realize that there's still some residential equipment that can operate in the absence of electricity. But I'm unaware of any large commercial system that does. And so let's not get hung up on the conversation about power reliability as a reason to stay on gas, because it's a false security and actually presents far greater risk in the absence of power than we credit, whether that be potential asphyxiation threat, carbon monoxide exposure, ignition, conflagration when you're trying to light gas appliances that aren't intended to be lit.
Plus, if the electricity goes out, the gas does too. A lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah, the gas does too, water does too if you're on a well. So I just want to make sure we don't get in that rabbit hole, because it's a particularly sensitive topic in my neck of the woods these days. I think it's very concerning when we start to create that false sense of security for something that's actually potentially quite hazardous if people believe it's that backup for them.
Thank you for that clarification, Carolyn. I am thinking in particular of one community. The town of Silverton got cut off for multiple days, multiple times last year due to avalanches, and their power went out. And they have diesel generator backup systems to continue to provide electricity for health and safety and security of the town. So yes, I totally get your point, and I appreciate you bringing that up, that for most commercial systems, and it's very different than a lot of the residential systems that I consult on, but at the same time, there are communities that rely on things such as diesel for extreme situations. So
yeah, and as a clarification, I'm certainly an advocate of excluding backup power units from any of the requirements for electric, right? So if we were to exclude things, I would exclude gas backup units or diesel backup units. So just that's my clarification. We certainly did from our all electric requirements in the Boulder Code as well. We do allow for backup power.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks to both of you. Hope.
Yeah, Carolyn did kind of hit upon this. I just wanted to kind of remind everyone, as we're talking about this, everybody's focusing on the multifamily, and multifamily does have a better opportunity of doing the full electric, where the multiplier may not come into play as much, but there are other occupancies like hazard occupancies where there's going to be very limitations, I occupancies, whether it's healthcare, but also incarceration. I shouldn't say incarceration, institutionalized, that also have very strict parameters that we have to keep in mind with as far as the electrification. And we don't necessarily want to hinder them from that. They do have to have the backup. So Carolyn's comment about maybe excluding the backup as far as that goes is something to keep in mind. But I just want to make sure that we're all thinking about it holistically, and holistically as far as the energy code also has to work with the other codes that are out there. And some of these concepts were really on the edge of whether they conflicted with some of the other codes. So just wanted to offer that insight.
Thank you, Hope. It's really helpful. I think Adam or Carolyn, did you still have your hand up? I'm gonna go to Adam, and then Carolyn, if you still have your hand up, I'll go to you. Okay, so Adam next.
I think the only thing I wanted to add was just like there is a list of exceptions in Appendix CF 103. Like it's quite long, and some of those include accounting for like backup systems that may be non-electric and other kinds of situations where it's like if you use electric for at least part of your heating load and you meet all these other criteria, that like why you need backup for certain situations and other conditions, that you could be exempted from the 1.2 or from the 25% increase. So I think that there are some potentially already exceptions in that long list of exceptions that address the concerns that some of you all have raised that would exempt them from having to do the 25% additional credits. And I think, you know, to Carolyn's or whoever's point, I think it was Carolyn who said we could also like exempt pool water heating or something like that. There's already so many lists. There's already such a long list of exceptions that I think adding like one more exception is not perhaps that significant of a problem. But just wanted to acknowledge that I think some of the concerns that were raised here are addressed in those exceptions already.
Thanks, Adam. So Kim, we'll go quickly to you, and then I'm going to kind of wrap us up and see if we can get a straw poll before we take a break.
Yeah, super quick. I just wanted to chime in that I know I just mentioned diesel backup generators is what they currently, that community leans toward for backup, but we're also working with them toward a community backup battery systems and more solar renewable energy to provide power for those battery systems. So, you know, still working in that direction of electrification and renewable energy and reduce greenhouse gas emissions and more clean air, et cetera. And I'm sure it's just all in the complicated aspects of this code. So thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Okay, so as we were sort of listening to the discussion, I kind of tried to reframe our options a bit, and I hope that I've captured them correctly. And I welcome any board member feedback if you don't think I've captured these with sort of the intent that I heard from folks. So I'm sort of seeing there being 3 pathways forward here. And again, I welcome pushback if these are not the right pathways. But the first one is to apply that Appendix CF 103.1. 1.25 multipliers for buildings without heat pumps and kind of keep the credit that requirement as sort of written within Appendix CF. Option 2, which I'm hearing, I think I heard from a lot of folks, is we like the concept, but let's think about changing the language in Appendix CF 103.1 to either do a couple of things. And if we go option 2, I think we would follow up with the board with a survey on how you guys envision changing this sort of credit multiplier to more uniquely fit the situations we're talking about. So a couple options I heard: scaling a degree of additional credits required, maybe expanding the exception list, or just really trying to dial in that section so it's more appropriate. And then I see sort of option 3 came out sort of earlier in the conversation around not applying a multiplier, but keeping credits in. So, you know, going back to our HO2 discussion earlier today, so crediting in the tables where folks go above and beyond for efficiency for heating and service water heating. So kind of building in that carrot approach versus the stick approach. So Carolyn and then Elizabeth.
Yeah, and I apologize for not flagging this earlier. I do have a concern about us focusing in explicitly on heat pumps. And so I think if we go forward with this, I think we should focus on where, you know, fossil fuel appliance use or something more along those lines. Just acknowledging that, you know, we may have district systems, other sources of energy that may not explicitly be thought of as a heat pump in the context. And so I just think it's cleaner if we don't just zero in on the heat pump explicitly. So just wanted to name that. Thank you.
Carolyn, would you be okay if I kind of classify that as option 2? Like we're doing some sort of multiplier, but we're gonna change it to, we're gonna rework that section.
Yeah, I don't think you have to change anything proposed here other than the language we use. So it's not buildings without heat pumps, it's buildings with a characteristic that we're intending to mean when we say without heat pumps.
Okay.
So it's not tied to without the heat pump, but rather tied to mixed fuel buildings.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
I think just we need to leave it as without heat pumps for now, though, because Appendix CF is written as without heat pumps. So I think all we're talking about is a modification. We could maybe add that, Kim, to the list of bullets there underneath that one, just because the context, Carolyn, is the appendix as it's written now.
I know.
Yeah,
I understand. That doesn't mean that I think that the IACC did a good job. So
fair enough. Fair enough. We gotta start somewhere.
Cool. So Elizabeth and Tim, I'll go to you guys and just ask you keep your comments brief because we're rolling into our break time. So yeah, Elizabeth first.
So is there...
Yeah, just with within option. Oops, sorry. Did you guys hear me okay?
Yep, go for it, Elizabeth.
Okay, sorry, I'm having internet connection issues. I think within option 3, there's still a means to, with the carrot versus stick, there's still a way to incentivize a building pushing all the way through to be 100% electric space and water heating there. And, maybe it's just, if you get 100 points, you get an extra 5 points. So I think there's still a way to incentivize while still encouraging partial credit for those that can get at least part of the way there. Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And then Tim, we'll go to you.
Yeah, I was going to just mention, but I think Elizabeth just probably made my point. I think in option 3, that's more in line with, not from my opinion of not doing any kind of multiplier, but kind of expanding the option 3 to maybe not just necessarily do heat pumps, but to be able to just do a sliding scale. So if you had a situation like the multifamily where it's everything electric, like I've got, except for one big appliance, then you can maybe get 90% or whatever that might be. But so that just clarified that thinking.
So I guess within option 3, as we're looking at, sorry, a bunch of dogs just ran past the window here. As we're looking at option 3, I think just that is a sort of a loose framework of what option 3 could be. And again, we'll have to follow up with the board on what more specifically you would want to see if we pursue that credits. So it could be the sliding scale, it could be the bonus points if you hit 100% all electric. So those can stay open within option 3. So let's quickly do a straw poll here, and then I'll send you guys off for a break before we circle back for a C407 discussion. So option 1 is to adopt the 1.25 multiplier for buildings without heat pumps, as we see it in Appendix CF. Option 2 is to do some multiplier to encourage or sort of penalize, however we want to frame it, encourage all electric, penalize fossil fuel, and we'll make changes to the current way that it's structured in Appendix CF to better adapt to this board's thinking. Or option 3 is that we do not add a multiplier, and instead we use credit options and points to encourage electrification in some degree. And then we'll have an abstain vote as well. Rob?
Just a quick question. Isn't option 3 basically just table 406?
It is, but I think
I don't understand the difference.
I think what I'm hearing for folks is that there's interest in taking that HO2 credit we talked about earlier, where you're getting sort of more points if you go above the federal minimum efficiency, and I'm not going to try to rehash that but that conversation, but applied also to water heating and maybe kind of looking more strategically at those credits to see if there's a way we incentivize through points.
But I think to Rob's point, option 3 involves the point values do not change. Rob, if that was your question, then the answer is yes. The point values in the tables would not change.
Thank you. Yes, thanks, Adam. Okay, cool. And we'll have an abstain vote for this one as well. So if you would like the board to pursue option 1, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 0 votes for option 1. If you would like to pursue option 2, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 votes for option 2. Thank you, guys. You can lower your hands. If your preference here is to stick with option 3, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you, guys. I see 4 votes for option 3. And then if any board members would like to abstain from this vote, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. I have 1 abstain. Okay, so option 1 got 0 votes, option 2 got 9 votes, option 3 got 4 votes, and we had 1 board member abstain. So that leaves the simple majority at option 2. And so what we'll do is follow up with you all after this meeting and put together a survey that sort of asks more detailed questions on how we might move that into code language. And I just want to note that I just got a chat from a board member that they would like to vote for option 2. They did not get a chance to vote, so that raises our votes to 10 votes for option 2. Okay, so I am going to send you guys out on a break. I'm going to give you only 8 minutes because we are 5 minutes behind schedule, but we are only 5 minutes behind schedule. So that is awesome. So I will ask that you guys come back at 11, and we'll see you guys very shortly. So thanks, everyone. All right, everyone, if you can hear my voice, I'm going to ask you guys, come on back and see some of your faces. Right. Okay.
Oh, wow, that's hot.
Oh, what are you doing, Hope? Be careful.
Oh, sorry. Hot coffee. I didn't realize I was unmuted. Don't take a big swig when it's steaming. That's all.
All right. Cool. Well, I hope you guys had a time to grab a drink and a snack, and now we'll have a whole hour left to dive into C407. So hopefully you guys, your brains are awake, your coffee's setting in, because we're gonna start a new topic today. So our discussion now is section C407. And so this is the way that we're gonna structure this next hour, is that there were 5 proposals from board members on how to change section C407. 4 of those proposals kind of fell all within the same vein. They're pretty much somewhat suggesting a very similar thing. So we're going to move into a session where we give each board member a minute to share their pitch on why they're recommending this change to section C407. And then we'll spend a good chunk of time discussing here, and I'll just go here, discussing all 4 of those proposals, which are, again, very similar in nature. That will take about half of our time. Then we'll move next to discussion number 2 here, which is a different proposal from board member to change section C407. And so, Elizabeth, we'll turn it over to you for the minute. We'll do the Q&A session, and then we'll have some discussion and polling on that. These are our top 2 priorities for section C407. If there is time, we have a final question for you all that will, well, I guess it depends on we're going to maybe save some time at the end to answer a final question that we think might come out of these, the decisions for these first 2. But I'm not going to confuse the board by going into more detail. We'll just get there if we get there. So we'll start off here with discussion number 1. This sort of broad-based question based on board proposals that we got does the board want to include site EUI-based compliance option for C407? So again, we're going to do that 1 minute for each board member who had a proposal. So we'll kind of popcorn around to all 4 of you. You'll have around a minute to share your rationale. And then the 5 minutes for Q&A will maybe hold, well, that's when we'll open it up to discussion. So we won't hold that to 5 minutes. It'll sort of be 5 minutes for every proposal, which will iron us out to about 20 minutes of discussion there. So I'm just going to go in order on this slide, call on board members one by one. Yeah, so we'll just kind of start this round robin, and Kristen, you're up first.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to cede most of my time here to Will, but just as a reminder on the site versus source, energy use intensity. Energy use intensity is a metric for buildings typically expressed in kBTU, British thermal units per square foot of energy consumed. If you're measuring the energy use intensity for a building on the site, you're looking at how much energy that building is actually using. If you're measuring based on source, you're attempting to trace back that energy use up to the source. So taking into account things like the electricity generation and how carbon intensive that is. And my concern was that source EUI metrics are often static and can't really or wouldn't really take into account the decarbonization of Colorado's grid. So that's why I put my preference for a site-based, because I think in our state that may lead to better outcomes for actually more efficient buildings. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Kristen. So Will, I will pass it to you next. And actually, I don't know if Will's still on.
Yeah, Will had to step away for the rest of the meeting. So sorry, guys, you get to hear from me again. But just advocating, I think for Will's position here. I think a lot of the reasons for doing a site EUI metric versus a cost metric have already been raised throughout our meeting today and in previous meetings about how cost is inherently a biased metric in favor of non-electric equipment and non-electric buildings. because natural gas inherently is a cheaper fuel source in most cases. The other reason for site EUI is just to create a more standardized and consistent metric across all building performance so that we're actually measuring based on energy performance and not based on cost implications. This is the energy conservation code, not the cost balancing code. And we are attempting to conserve energy and not necessarily measure how we do that based on how much it costs for that energy. And so that is why we are advocating for a site EUI based metric over cost. And I will just preview that there may be some willingness to consider cost as an alternative metric in addition to an EUI if we want it, if the board wants to consider both rather than splitting just to EUI, but we will be advocating solely for EUI at least to start.
Thank you, Adam. Awesome. Elizabeth, you are up next.
Yeah, naturally the energy person would like to have a metric that is energy savings, not cost savings. It's just a lot more fun to talk about things. I will say that there's potentially two ways we could consider using energy or site EUI as a metric. It could either be a fixed target, meaning you design your building to a target EUI and there's no baseline. It just is what it is. And that's by building type. That can get a little challenging if you have, say, an office that actually operates as like a 24/7 call center, or a warehouse that is actually a 3-shift warehouse. So, our fixed EUIs can be a little challenging for those buildings. I think that's a hurdle that we could deal with, but that's option one is, you're designing to a target, there is no baseline. The other option is that you are designing to an EUI savings relative to a baseline. So then we would want to consider, how are we defining a baseline EUI? Is that an all gas building? That's how Denver does it. So Denver has basically two options. You can comply by energy cost savings, or you can comply by site energy savings. That's their Appendix SE. And then their third option there is Appendix PT, which is the one I described first, which is designing to a fixed target. There is no baseline. So Denver's got these three options, and two of them are energy based. The nice thing for us as energy modelers is there is only one baseline, and we can evaluate all three options at once, which is really cool. But it is a totally different energy modeling protocol than what is in C407 currently. It uses ASHRAE 90.1 Appendix G, which is a gas baseline, always a gas baseline. And just the methodology is completely different. Uses building performance factors instead of this, percent savings that we're talking about. If we are trying to define EUI reduction, we'd need to have a lot of conversations about what is the baseline. Maybe we're just using a C407 gas baseline, which I think could be done, but just something to consider that there are two options there. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Elizabeth. All right. And then last but not least, I'll turn it over to Carolyn.
Thanks. And I won't need my whole minute. I concur with what's said before me, with one exception, that I don't agree that gas is inherently cheaper. I think our assumptions around gas make it appear inherently cheaper, but I just wanted to caveat that, as it's far less predictable and harder to really know what the reality is. So I want to say that. And then to Elizabeth's point, Boulder utilizes the fixed target EUI and the option for percent better than modeled baseline options for those buildings that don't quite fit the fixed EUI target, and the fixed EUI target is by far the one most utilized by projects coming through. So it has that inherent benefit of saving substantial. I think we're estimating like you spend maybe 60% of the modeling effort that you would have to by going through an EUI pathway. So I think there's benefit there.
Awesome. Thanks, Carolyn. Elizabeth, do you have something quick to add?
Yeah, I just want to add that at least under Boulder's fixed EUI target, we don't have a target for all building types. So that would just be something that the board would need to discuss.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you, board members, for pitching your proposals. So I think, you know, the way that the options that I think Adam and I kind of came to before this meeting based on those board proposals are kind of on the slide, and this is the point in time where we will open up the floor to board discussion, comments, questions, and if you guys have another offer on a different option that we want to think about here, happy to do so. So option 1 would be we keep 407 the way it is. Option 2 would be we replace C407 with an energy pathway, so our site EUI pathway. Or option 3 could be it sounds like something maybe. Well, I don't want to. Okay, so option 3 would be to keep both, have it as an option if folks want it as an option for compliance. There might be more options here, but this is where I would love to open up the board floor. If folks have questions for the board members that just shared their proposals or any comments on what you guys are thinking, love to hear those. Rob.
I think my concern with turning our back entirely on keeping costs as an option, I think there's maybe 2 points to make there is first, cost is a metric of affordability. And if we are not, we have a statutory obligation to take affordability into account. And if we aren't, if we eliminate that, I think that that's a challenge. That's a challenge there. The other thing is that the reason that cost is kind of used as a metric is that we can compare it to gas or a natural gas. We can make a natural gas comparison, but there are places of the state that can use delivered heating fuels, LP, and maybe heating oil. It's not as common as it is maybe in Vermont, New Hampshire, or Maine, but it's still not zero. And so the cost, the way that the cost metrics are going to apply to premises like that are really fundamentally different. And so I would my preference would be to keep it very heavily based on or solely based on energy cost. But given an option between these two, I would probably point us. I'd encourage us to not eliminate cost altogether as a.
Oh, awesome! Thanks, Rob, for your comments. Any other board members have any thoughts or ideas to share as it relates to these?
I'll just say, I mean, to Rob's point, I do feel I need to say, a BTU is always a BTU. It's always convertible from whatever the energy source is. $1 per therm, $1 per kilowatt hour, $1 per gallon changes, and it's always inherently biased by what we know today and not what we can forecast going forward during the lifetime of these buildings.
Thanks, Carolyn. Yeah, Kim.
I'll just state that as an energy modeler myself, and with my frustrated experiences with trying to encourage electrification of buildings in the HERS world residentially, I'm in full support of switching over to an EUI pathway.
Awesome. Thanks, Kim. And just calling out Elizabeth in the chat. Well, you raised your hand, so I will let you.
I know, I feel like I talk a lot, so I'm trying to shut up more. But I do favor options because it's very difficult to apply like an EUI target to every building type. Especially when it comes to like manufacturing and industrial. And we really have to find solutions that work for all building types. If we keep the doors open to having an energy cost pathway, it doesn't mean it's going to be used all the time, but it does leave that door open. I'll also just share, since Denver has adopted their new code with these 3 options, and again, 2 of them are energy based, Now that's always with a gas baseline, right? So, with the, electrification kind of incentivization of how that metric works, I can say 100% of the projects that we've documented in Denver have used one of the energy pathways. I've had 0 projects use the cost pathway, but it's there. It's an option. There's probably 1 or 2 projects that we've got coming down the pipeline that are more on the industrial side of things that have large process loads that may be looking at that. So I like that option is there, but it does very rarely get used. And the projects that pursue more electrification, they find that the energy compliance pathways are the easier pathways. So I like options. Just because the option is there doesn't mean we would lose the benefit of having EUI or energy pathways. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Elizabeth. Ron.
I would just say that, coming from a jurisdiction that has multiple utilities that serve Boulder County, when we look at cost as a method, it creates a lot of confusing comparisons between buildings. And it doesn't come up that much because usually, as was just said, the energy cost pathway is not popular. But it's something that's always in the back of my mind is that, we have 2 buildings that are really identical but behave differently in terms of code compliance because they're served by different utilities. It just makes for a very messy situation. So the idea of having a uniform site EUI that's just looking at energy consumed BTUs, this seems like a much better way to go for me.
Awesome. Thanks, Ron. Okay. Any other questions or thoughts on these options from our board members? Okay. I'm not hearing any, which means we might be ready to do a little straw poll here. So option 1, 2, 3, we will keep as written on the slides here. And we'll have an abstain as well for this vote. So if you would like to vote for option 1 to keep C407 based solely on energy cost, please. Okay, awesome. Thank you. You guys can lower your hands. That was 1 vote for option 1. Option 2, to remove the current C407 energy cost pathway and replace it with the site UI pathway, please raise your hand. And so just so I'm clear, option 2 is to remove energy cost and not to keep it as an option. So make sure everyone has that clear. So we have 9 board members who voted for option 2. Okay, thank you, everyone. You guys can lower your hands. And then option 3, to keep energy cost and a site UI pathway, please raise your. Okay, great. I see option 3. I see 5 hands. Thank you, guys. You can lower your hands. And then any board members that would like to abstain, please raise your hand. Okay, 0 abstains. So we had 1 vote for option 1, 9 votes for option 2, 5 votes for option 3. So by way of simple majority, we'll look at moving towards option 2, which is to move to a site EUI pathway rather than an energy cost pathway for C407. All right, great. Thank you, guys. So now we'll move on to the discussion question number 2, which again came from a proposal from a board member. And so I'm gonna, Elizabeth, turn it back over to you to give your 1-minute pitch on this proposal, and then we'll do Q&A and discussion, and then we'll kind of get to our straw poll.
Yeah, sure. So I think this question applies to no matter how we decide to take C407, whether it's energy cost, energy savings, or a target EUI. This is really true. And it comes to what you can claim savings for or demonstrate an energy reduction for per the rules in C407. And I sent Kim and Adam a list of all of the sections in C407 that currently do not align with C406. I don't know, Kim, do you happen to have that handy?
Yeah, well, while you're pitching, I'll work on pulling it up so I can
Okay.
share.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Sorry. I should have had that handy myself. But there's a lot. And I just want to make things align, especially if we're trying to make the percent savings align, then the things that we should take credit for should also align. So things like your water load reduction, like using say lower flow plumbing fixtures to reduce your water heating load. We are not allowed to take credit for that in C407, and those are real energy savings. If we were to move the demand reduction, or excuse me, the load management credits, but increase the savings requirement, I would say let's add a line in the C407 table that lets you model those savings, whether they are cost savings or EUI savings from, say, thermal mass. Like, we're not allowed to really take credit for thermal mass. That has to be there's specific rules in that for C407. Oh yeah, there's my list. Things like here we go. E03. You can claim credits in C406 for having a tighter building. And in C407 you cannot. Things like WO2, where you can get extra credit for doing heat pump water heaters. In C407, your baseline is also a heat pump water heater, so you do not get the same savings credit in the model baseline as you would in C406. And I won't go through all of this list, but it's a big list of things that we cannot claim savings for either at all or equivalently in C407 as we do in C406.
Okay, thanks, Elizabeth.
And I'm thinking, if we have to have the percent savings aligned, then the credits should align as well. Now, this is, I would say, still applicable if we go to a site EUI target, because there are still rules about not just necessarily savings that we can claim, but even how we model things. Like, for example, L06, like the way that residential lighting is supposed to be modeled in multifamily buildings. We need to think about that, because if we're modeling to an EUI target, we need to be able to have some rules about how to model residential lighting. So anyway, yeah, that with whatever metric we decide on, we just want to make things match up. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Elizabeth. Okay, so I guess I can keep this list up, but just want to open it up to board questions, comments for Elizabeth on this proposal.
Hey, Elizabeth. This is Anna. Sorry, I had to turn my camera off. I had a question on how you would suggest showing energy savings, for example, like the service hot water sub-meters or Q04 fault detection.
Yeah, no, and that's a great point, because you can't. So, but could you then either, let's say, if that applies, perhaps it changes your calculation. So let's say you want to do those items, and let's say that they are worth 5 points or whatever. You could take that out of your calculation metric for the percent savings that you have to achieve. So that then it's basically applied exactly the same as C406.
Anna, did that answer your question?
It did. I think the other one I would add to this list is the language. I know you had some, crossing out of the allowable amount of renewables to be modeled in the proposed above, but I would add that to this list as something that needs to be studied further.
Yeah, great point. We would want to make sure that that aligns as well.
Thanks, Anna. Any other questions, concerns, thoughts, ideas from board members? I know this is a new concept, so I'm just going to give a moment for it to percolate. So apologies for the awkward silence, but I'm going to maintain it for a bit longer. Okay. I'm not hearing any, so I will speak slowly in case ideas or questions come up. But I think the question that we have for the board is, would you guys like us to add the ability for buildings to credit efficiency items in C406 towards the savings in C407, so that those are greater aligned? And our options here are sort of, yes, we do. No, we don't. So we didn't include those options on the slide, but we'll sort of do a yes, no vote here, with an abstain vote as well. So yeah, Rob.
Hey, sorry. So, if you were looking to pursue those additional efficiency credits that are available through the 406 tables, why wouldn't you just choose the 406 tables as your compliance pathway instead of 407?
It's a great question. Elizabeth, do you or Anna, any of our energy modelers jump in here?
Yeah, I think that would only be applicable to a handful of credits, things that cannot be captured within C407 because you can't, that like there's no modeling methodology to claim savings for fault detection, for example, but you get credits for it in C406. So you know, we're requiring the same amount of savings between C406 and C407, but we're not giving the C407 people the same options. So, you know, if fault detection has value in C406, I want to give it the same value in C407. But perhaps something else, like say, you know, service water heating flow reduction. You know, there's a certain number of points in C406, but that's something I can model in C407 and can have a really great impact, especially if it, you know, is perhaps better than the prescriptive value of C406. So, you know, if a project does, you know, a really great job on flow reduction, perhaps, you know, renewable or, you know, service water heat recovering through drain heat recovery or something like that. Like we can't claim any savings for that, but we can model it. And we can model it on top of the efficiencies that we achieve with the equipment as well. So that starts to layer in more precisely and holistically. So, you know, under C407, we have a lot more flexibility based on all the synergies of the equipment. I find it typically to be a more cost-effective way to get a compliant building, honestly. But now that the savings have increased, the misalignment between the credits you can get for C406 and the credits that you cannot get within C407 are a real problem. Because let's say, you know, we have to get, you know, say between 25 and 30% energy savings, energy cost savings, and I'm not allowed to claim savings for everything here on this list. It seems unfair to require the same sort of, so let's call it ineffective points while you're taking away all the credits for this list of points. So I think, you know, to your point, Rob, I wouldn't use C407. I would tell people it's easier to use C406. Like if we cannot make them align, C407 is very, very, very difficult.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Rob, did that answer your question?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Great. Okay, and we have not voted yet, so all questions and comments are still, I know this was a new proposal, so any other comments or questions come up that we want to address before we do our first straw poll here?
And I should say, Kim, could you maybe bring up the C407 table so people know what we would be modifying and just like the language?
Do you,
what is it? Do I even have it in there?
Is it this one?
No, it's the what is it? Anna, do you happen to have that off the top of your head? C407 point.
The modeling protocol.
Something, yeah, it's the modeling rules. Like it defines your standard reference baseline table.
Is it? I've got the code pulled up, so someone can tell me the section.
C407.4.1.
Building specifications.
Yeah.
That's the one.
I will stop sharing and re-share my screen with this. And I can drop the link as well for folks to look at. So this is the table. Is that correct?
Yep, that's the one.
Okay.
So just to give you an example of like, in surface water heating, for example, since that one's kind of an easy one to visualize, for your like there is no option there under service water heatings to essentially claim savings for a load reduction. You have to do that the same. Another one is just like process loads or internal loads. So like if you think about the opportunities in C406 for efficient kitchen equipment, whether it's commercial kitchen or multifamily, say, in C407, you model that exactly the same, basically, in baseline and proposed. So under, it's scrolled up a little bit under internal gains. So all of those things, receptacle loads, motor loads, like there's so many efficiency opportunities within those loads that, it helps to reduce our process loads, but to not be able to claim savings for things like elevators, that's a C406 credit. No credit here if you can have a more efficient elevator. Refrigeration, cooking equipment, no credit.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I'm going to go to, it looks like we have a couple more comments, questions. So I'm going to pop to Jesse and then Carolyn.
Yeah, thanks. Elizabeth, early on in your pitch, you just kind of, I think jokingly referred to C407 as sort of being, everyone was tired when they developed it. But like, does anyone have a sense of why this is occurring? Like, there seems to me like a really big discrepancy if what you're saying is happening to this extent. And I'm just curious, like, why would it have been this way? Like, is there any commentary about that or any context that you can provide? I just don't understand why it would be so different.
That's a good question, Jesse. And I know we've talked about it a little bit offline. I don't know.
Maybe Hope or Anna, do you guys have any insight into, like, in the code development process? Is this brought up? Like, is this something others are concerned about?
Well, I'm fairly sure that there was some discussion that happened on it. You have to remember that these code proposals were originally looked at by the subcommittee that is assigned to deal with specific sections of the code. And the amount of time that they spent in making sure things are as such does not always mean that section 406, while they focused on that there ever was any correlation that went over into what's happening in 406. And so when you have it split like that, sometimes you don't get that connection. And in this particular process, it's a new process that happened. It got vetted a lot more than the normal process would be. But there also isn't a correlation committee that oversaw some of these items that typically would happen with the other codes. So while this was looked at with the subcommittee and then brought forward at the consensus committee, and I want to say that there were probably some proposals here that got modified when the consensus committee got a hold of it, but there's still that, somewhat disconnect, because we might have heard and discussed 406 4 months prior to when this came up on the agenda. So sometimes there just isn't that connection between the two of them. This was a 2.5 year process of going through all of this. So, you may not remember 6 months ago, or at least I don't always remember 6 months ago.
So maybe a little bit of the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, kind of thing.
I think there was a little, obviously everybody tried and everybody brought up, but the reality is we're all just human, right?
Absolutely. To give you a sense of, I think, the things that were paid attention to, the only things that changed between this version and 2021 are the things in blue. So things that are in black were not changed, not addressed. So that doesn't really match up with things that changed in C406. So things that are different in here, in addition to what we see in this table, the percent savings increased, again, just kind of arbitrarily to try to match C406. And I will share that I don't think they really did align, the percent savings we had to get in C407 under 2021 was just a flat 20%. Like, I don't think any thought was put into that. So that was an issue. And now thought has been put into that, which is great, but they didn't finish that process. So now the percent savings aligns with the points required, which I think is terrific, but the things you can claim savings for did not get aligned. So I feel like we just have to finish that process, and then the alignment will actually be pretty good.
Awesome. Okay.
Oh, and I should say the other thing that they changed in C407 was around the renewable and load management credits. But I feel like that's a little sloppy because that's just a check the box. Like, you just have to get some credits. And those are things that I think when you're doing a performance-based model, they should be included in the building performance. So I feel like that was kind of like, I understand the intent. They were trying to get that to align, but I don't like how they did it, because this is a performance path, not a prescriptive path.
Okay, thanks, Elizabeth. All right, any more clarifying questions, comments from the board before we straw poll everybody on this question in front of you? Okay, seeing no chat, seeing no hands.
I'll throw out one other thing. Just because of how we're dealing with C407 in the 2021 IECC, we do have issues with that, especially for projects with large process loads. So those projects that are not able to hit that, again, arbitrary percent savings, tend to just abandon IECC and use ASHRAE to comply. So I don't love that. I would prefer projects stay in IECC, but know that that's kind of what's happening with the 2021 IECC is people are just using the ASHRAE option.
Okay, thanks, Elizabeth. All right, so we'll go ahead with a straw poll for the question that we see on the slide here. So the answer to the question is either yes, we want to add the ability for buildings to credit efficiency items in C406 towards savings in C407. The other option that I will poll is no, meaning that we don't want to change the current structure of C407 to add the ability for buildings to credit efficiency items, more efficiency items in C406. So our options will be yes to this question, no to this question, or abstain. So if board members would like to vote yes to add the ability for buildings to credit efficiency items in C406 towards savings in C407, please raise your hand. This is a yes vote. Okay, oh my goodness, is it real? Okay, we've got, I think, looks like 30. Okay, everyone keep their hands up. Don't move. Okay, I'm seeing 15 hands raised in support of adding the ability for buildings to credit efficiency items. That's a long sentence. I'm going to stop saying the whole thing. So yes, 15 votes for yes. Thank you, guys. I think that represented all of our board members, but I will still go through our other options. If any board members would like to vote no on this question, please raise your hand. And Kristen, I think you just raised your hand. So, okay, thank you. Just making sure. Okay, so I see no votes for no, so 0 votes for no. And any board members that would like to abstain from this vote, please raise your hand. Okay, seeing 0 abstains. Okay, well, that was a full clear majority from the board. So awesome work, guys. Okay, so I think Adam, and I'm going to look to you a little bit. We have excess time, which is a rare commodity in this board meeting setting. So I think, Adam, we wanted to move next to circle back to the question that is a follow-up from our first decision for C407, which is to discuss and ask the board if we want to have a fixed DUI. Is that where we want to go next?
Okay. I think so. Yeah, the decision kind of trying to parse out, you know, the options that Elizabeth presented for what Denver has included, where they've included the fixed EUI and then, you know, EUI reduction based on a certain baseline option. And so I think we just, you know, since we have extra time, we were going to pull this in a survey, but since we have time to talk about it, let's talk about whether the board, you know, if the board has perspectives on to allow both of those as options or to, you know, lean in on one option or the other.
Can you say it again, or do you have a slide?
We don't have a slide. She's putting it together
as we speak. So if board members have thoughts and comments, please raise your hand, jump in, and I'll share this in a moment.
Can you say it again then, Adam?
Yeah, so the question between whether or not to have a fixed EUI target, so every building type in every climate zone has a fixed EUI target, or to have where buildings have can get a certain EUI reduction below a baseline. And Elizabeth, if I'm saying that wrong, please correct me, but that was my understanding.
Yeah, it's basically, are we doing energy savings or are we doing an energy target?
Yeah, like a performance target or percentage savings below baseline.
Yeah, and I would be in favor of having options. Again, I like options. I still like the cost option, but I like having two energy options as well. Partly because there are building types that would have difficulty necessarily designing to a fixed target option. And will have better success demonstrating an EUI reduction. And I think we could still accomplish what we're trying to do if we kind of give people that option. But I can also say, you know, maybe I could potentially play devil's advocate here and argue for a fixed EUI target option, because that does kind of align with the you know, the Colorado Building Performance Standards, which have an EUI target, an EUI target option by building type. But there's also some flexibility there with building type. So there's potential to make those things align. I could also be convinced to go with that EUI target specifically because those buildings will have to eventually be compliant with the Colorado Building Performance Targets. So I think they should be thinking about it. So perhaps that could also be a building size threshold question. You know, if you are to be compliant with the Colorado Building Performance Standard, which means you're a commercial building above 50,000 square feet, you have to meet these targets because you're going to have to anyways, once it's an existing building. And no one wants to turn over a building that's not compliant with those things right out of the box.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Elizabeth. Carolyn, I see your hand up, so I'll go to you.
Yeah, there was a lot there. Thank you, Elizabeth. Maybe I'll start in backwards from where I was going to. I think if we want to, first off, I guess maybe I'll say this. I like the option of having EUI targets, but also a different pathway if something doesn't fit squarely in the round hole we've created with the EUI targets. Because we just can't be exhaustive in our ability to define targets. There is going to be a building configuration that just simply isn't going to fit within that. And then to the extent that we're setting targets off the state BPS targets, I think we need to be cautious about creating an expectation that a building that's built to meet the target is going to perform to the target. So I think I would be cautious about aligning them exactly, but rather I think in our new code, we need to be more aggressive than those targets to ensure that we're actually delivering an outcome, because we know building occupants have such an influential impact on actual performance of a building.
And to be clear, I don't know that the suggestion was to align the EUI targets with the BPS, because I think that the idea inherently is that code should be ahead of the BPS, right? Like in general, and also should be aligned with performance relative to what you would see under C406. Like I would say the BPS targets are probably significantly less stringent than that. And so, yeah, I don't know that, just to be clear, I don't know that that was the proposal, more so that an EUI target is easy to compare against an EUI target that you're trying to hit for a BPS compliance.
Right. And ideally our targets are being set to have the same outcome as what's currently in the other pathways right now. That's ideally where you're going.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Carolyn. So I think option 3 is probably a little bit of both. Having targets, but then having the flexibility for those that don't fit. Elizabeth.
Yeah, just to expand on that, there are building types that are not subject to that EUI target explicitly, like the MAI, manufacturing, agricultural, industrial type of buildings wouldn't have an EUI target option, obviously. So I think we would have to have some kind of both option simply to encompass all building types. I'll also add there's, I think the Colorado Building Performance Standards are very new. There are a lot of questions about that. So I don't want to get too hung up on that as being a perfect metric just yet. Like, for example, the first draft of that did not have any adjustments for different climate zones. And I don't think it's exactly fair for a building in climate zone 6 to be subject to the same EUI as a building in climate zone 4. I think that's all being worked out. Anna, you may have some insight on that since I think you guys are assisting with that. But I would say then the same thing for operating hours, like our call center office versus our standard 9 to 5 office, our 3-shift warehouse versus our 1-shift warehouse. Operating hours has a lot of influence on EUI as well. And I think there's going to be some flexibility built into the building performance standards that we would want to make sure are applied equivalently to a fixed EUI target kind of metric, or we simply leave that both option open for those buildings that don't fit, the square peg doesn't fit into the round hole. They could then use the percent savings metric, while the whole Colorado BPS is still being massaged to work for the state.
Yeah, we have some concerns around some of the BPS items that you talked about, but I don't think that isn't something that we could work out as we move forward and work on the language. I think just understanding where the board wants to take this, we can internally talk through the issues that we see with the BPS and the concerns that we have that you brought up. So definitely we're on the same page with you there, that there are items that need to be figured out before we could implement.
Yes, Hope. Oh, Hope, did you want to say something?
No, I pushed the wrong button. Apologies.
No worries.
I was agreeing with Anna.
Okay. All right, so I will maybe do a call for final questions or comments from board members on these options before we do a quick straw poll, and then I think we'll wrap up for the day. Okay. I am not seeing any questions or comments, so we'll go ahead and do a quick straw poll here. And okay, I'm sorry, I got distracted by chat. So we have our 3 options here. So keep it to fixed site EUI targets. Option 2 is percent savings from a baseline. Set the targets based on the percent savings. Or option 3 is both. So have some buildings with fixed site building types with fixed site EUI targets, but allow that flexibility for a percent savings from an energy baseline in case, as the analogy has gone in this meeting, the square peg does not fit into the round hole. So and then we'll have an abstain option as well. So for board members that would like to move forward with option 1, please raise your hand. Okay, I see no hands for option 1. Board members who would like to vote for option 2, please raise your hand. Okay, thanks everybody. I see one vote for option 2. And then for option 3, which is both pathway, please raise your hand. Okay, thanks everyone. Oh, everyone got their hands up? Thank you. Okay, so I see 14 hands raised in support of option 3. And any board, you guys can lower your hands. And then any board members that would like to abstain from this vote, please raise your hand. And Kristen, I think you were a option 3 vote.
Yes, sorry.
No worries, no worries. Okay, great. Okay, so within the site UI target, site UI approach, we will go with option 3, which is both to look at fixed site targets and flexibility with that % savings from an energy baseline. Well, I just want to say huge kudos to this board for getting through all our discussion items today, for keeping your comments concise, and for allowing us to move through these very complicated topics. As we move forward with the first commercial code draft, which we will begin working on following this meeting, I just want to emphasize that there's a lot of gray area that Adam and I and our team with Anna and Hope will still be sorting through, but we have some really good general direction from you all, and that code draft will be available to you all at the beginning of October, and that's the point in time where we can really read, review, dig in, and suggest some more specific changes. So lots more work to do on the commercial code, but this sort of wraps up, and I'm just going to keep us moving through these slides. Again, planning for all contingencies here. This kind of wraps up our commercial code discussion. I think we've identified a couple of survey follow-up items that we want to make sure we get feedback on from the board before we start writing code. So you will likely see another commercial survey from us, at least one more. I think probably just one more before we get that draft to you guys. So we will follow up with more information on that. And so then as far as our next steps, our next meeting is Thursday, September 5th from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. You guys might realize this is also a Thursday meeting. This next one's a Thursday meeting. We switched our cadence around from the Tuesday, Thursday to accommodate for Labor Day. So 9 to 11, and this is our meeting where we're going to start diving into the residential code discussions. The way that we structure those code discussions will be a result of the input we get from you all in the residential code survey that is live and to you all now. And I really want to emphasize that this survey is due on Monday. So the survey is due Monday at 8 a.m. You guys have had this survey for about a month now. And so unfortunately, we cannot extend the deadline beyond that unless there are very extenuating circumstances. And then if so, please email Adam and I. But we need the bulk of board responses in by Monday so that our team can start planning for the next meeting, making sure we've got all the information, resources, slides to you all ahead of time. So, you know, all of these deadlines fall in our process to make sure that we're really well prepared for these meetings and discussions. So if you guys are able to get that survey done Monday at 8 a.m., it will be a huge weight off of our shoulders so that we can really plan effectively for meeting 14. Again, if you have a concern and not getting that survey done in time, please email us so we know and we can try to accommodate if possible. Our next, we'll approve meeting 13 minutes at the start of our next meeting, as we always do. And I believe that's all I've got for you guys. So I'll stop sharing. If board members have any final questions in our last 5 minutes, I welcome those. Otherwise, we'll send you off 5 minutes early.
I would just like to note that I haven't seen that last slide in our presentation in a long time because we never get there. So congratulations on getting there, guys.
Awesome. All right. Well, if there's no questions, then have a great Thursday, everybody. And we'll talk to you guys in a couple weeks.
Thank you, guys.